Welcome to the deep dive, where we take dense source material and turn it into the clearest knowledge nuggets possible for you. Our mission is always to get you informed quickly, but also thoroughly, so you walk away with real insight, not just a list of facts. And today we are doing a really fascinating dive. We're going deep beneath the soil line to look at the biological architecture of coexistence. We're exploring how plant communities went from this, intense cutthroat competition to a really sophisticated kind of cooperation. And what's wild is that this knowledge doesn't just show us non-human intelligence, it actually gives us a kind of cognitive blueprint for deep rest, for mental clarity.
The sources we're pulling from today are exceptional. On one hand, you have the high-level concepts from the Sanctuary of Sleep mission. So that's all about deep rest, biosemiotics, and this idea of dissolving the default mode network in the brain. And then, to ground all that, we have some incredible hard science ecological research from people like Suzanne Samard and Monica Gaviano. Real data on fungal networks, plant communication, and even plant learning. So the central question for us, I think, is pretty simple. How do plants solve what's called the packing problem? I mean, how do you fit hundreds of different species into a tiny space without the whole system just, collapsing into a war over resources? And we want to pull out the most surprising facts about this Internet of Plants and what it could mean for our own mental organization.
That idea of stillness and clarity is so central to the philosophy in these sources. They introduce these two archetypes to guide the whole thing. You have Grace, who is the ethos, the botanical guardian, and then you have Eli, the scribe. He represents the logos, the keeper of the archive, the structure. And the whole point of blending these things, the ancient history, the science, the deep rest, is to get to what they call cognitive clarity. It's like taking the resilience of nature, its non-hierarchical structure, and using that as a model for our own minds, which is just a beautiful idea.
It is, and what makes it actionable is the neuroscience behind it. They're not just, selling nice sounds. They're engineering audio using what they call sleepy narrative and something called fractal geometry in their soundscapes. And there's a very specific neural goal.
Okay, fractal geometry, that sounds really technical. Why that specific?
Well, fractals are these self-similar patterns you see everywhere in nature. Think about a tree branch or a fern leaf or a coastline. The brain finds these patterns naturally restorative. It doesn't have to work hard to process them, and it's all designed to help with the functional disintegration of the default mode network, or DMN.
Right, the DMN. Let's unpack that because it's such a key piece of the science here. What is it exactly?
The DMN is basically the brain's inner chatter. It's the network that handles rumination, thinking about yourself, worrying about the future. It's what kicks in when you're not focused on a task.
It's your mind wandering.
Exactly. And when it's hyperactive, that's when you feel anxiety, that mental friction. So by gently helping it to disintegrate, not switch off, just relax its tight circuits, you open the door to real cognitive rest. And this whole internal mission is tied directly to a bigger environmental idea, the ARK mission.
Acts of restorative kindness.
Right. It's about shifting how we see the natural world. So instead of gardening, which implies control and hierarchy, we're pushed toward guarding the wisdom that's already there.
I love that. Control versus guarding, it really forces you to look at everything differently, including things we call weeds. The sources rebrand them as wildkin.
Precisely. Because those so-called weeds are often the foundation stones. They're the pioneers, the nutrient recyclers that hold the whole ecosystem together. They are absolutely essential.
And that shift from control to guarding, it makes so much sense when you look at the evolutionary history.
Yeah.
I mean, when plants first came on land, it was an open field, but as soon as they got successful, space got tight, and they started running into each other. And that's where you get classic Darwinian competition.
And it was brutal. Plants can't run away, so they had to innovate. They developed chemical warfare, toxic sap, spines, and just aggressive growth. Grow taller, hoard the light, grow deeper roots, grab the water first. But the sources make this critical point. Competition has a hard limit. If you get too good at it, if you poison your neighbor too effectively, you end up poisoning the soil and the water that you, the so-called winner, also need.
Right, so winning the battle means you lose the entire war.
Exactly. You destroy the very possibility of life.
So the first step wasn't full cooperation. That's too risky. What was that first sort of baby step towards coexistence?
It was niche partitioning. It's basically a strategy of differentiation. Don't fight for the exact same thing at the exact same time. So some plants will send roots really deep for old water. Others have shallow roots for recent rain.
Or timing, right. Like in a meadow, you'll have one flower pop up in early spring, and another will wait until late summer. They're using the same space, but they've divided up the time.
You're just staying out of each other's way. But like you said, you can only divide things so finely. Eventually, they had to start actively helping each other.
Which sounds completely backwards from a survival perspective. Survival through sharing. The sources say the key to this was nitrogen.
Nitrogen's the big one. It's critical for growth, but plants can't get it from the air on their own. This is where the nitrogen-fixing legumes come in. Peas, clover, beans. They partner with bacteria in their roots that can pull nitrogen out of the air and turn it into fertilizer.
And this is the amazing part from the new research. They don't just keep it for themselves, they leak it into the soil, increasing the available nitrogen for their neighbors by, what, 50 to 200%? They're basically funding the whole neighborhood.
And the logic is just so clear. Generosity creates stability. The small cost of sharing nitrogen is way less than the cost of your whole ecosystem collapsing.
Yeah.
And that idea that sharing is stability, that's what opens the door for the Internet of Plants.
Okay, let's talk architecture. Once they're trading, how does the whole system actually work? Let's get into the mycelial networks.
Right, so these are the fungal threads, the hyphae, that weave through the soil. And they connect the roots of thousands of different plants. I mean, a pine tree can be connected to a birch tree. It's not just one species. And it's not just a physical connection. It's an active, two-way highway for carbon, water, phosphorus, and all these complex chemical signals.
And Suzanne Simar's research proved this isn't random. It's incredibly sophisticated. She showed they have kin recognition. How does a tree with no brain know the difference between its own kid and a total stranger?
They use these unique chemical signatures from their roots. Root exudates. Simard found that the big mother trees would send more carbon and resources to seedlings that were their own offspring, their own kin.
Wow.
They're actively investing in their own genetic line. But what's really fascinating is the fungi aren't just passive cables. They're regulators. They run a system you could call commons management.
So the fungi are like the community bank. They'll help you out if you're in trouble. But if you're just taking and not giving back, they cut you off.
That is a perfect analogy. The fungi manage the whole trade balance, phosphorus for carbon. They'll support a tree that's temporarily shaded or stressed. But if a plant is consistently parasitic over time, the fungi will actually reduce the nutrient flow. They might even sever the connection and send those resources somewhere more productive. Reciprocity is enforced.
And this network isn't just underground, it's in the air, too, for collective defense, using volatile organic compounds, VOCs.
Yes, VOCs. The smell of freshly cut grass, for instance, isn't a nice smell. It's a chemical scream. It's a distress signal. So when an insect chews on a sagebrush, that plant releases a specific mix of these VOCs into the air. And here's the genius part. The neighboring plants eavesdrop on those signals. They get the warning, and they start producing their own defensive chemicals before the insect even gets to them.
So it's a shared intelligence network.
It is, and the research shows it reduces damage from herbivores by up to 50%.
This level of management and communication, it just naturally brings up the question of plant intelligence. I mean, if they can do all this, how much cognition are we actually talking about?
And this is where Monica Galliano's work just completely changes the game. Her experiment with the Mimosa pudica plant is the perfect example. It's the plant that folds its leaves when you touch it. So Galliano set up a device to drop the plants again and again. After just a few drops, the plants learned that the stimulus wasn't a real threat, and they just stopped folding their leaves.
And the really shocking part wasn't that they learned, it was that they remembered.
Exactly. The memory lasted for 28 days, without a brain, without a single neuron. So the question is, where is that information stored? The science suggests two possibilities. One is epigenetic memory. Chemical tags on the DNA that act like on-off switches, drought on, drought off. And the other, which is just mind-blowing, is distributed memory. The idea that the memory isn't in one place. It's stored in the pattern of connections across the entire fungal network. The whole system remembers its history.
Which allows for learning at a community level, what the sources call adaptive plasticity. They're not just running a fixed program, they're acting as a single coordinated unit.
A great example is how forests manage autumn leaf drop. The trees don't just use a calendar, they integrate multiple signals: day length, temperature, and critically, water availability. New research shows that during a drought, the whole forest will coordinate and adjust the timing of leaf drop together to conserve water for the entire community. It's a collective strategy.
This is all what led Galliano to explore a language beyond words. It goes beyond simple signals.
She suggests that deep knowledge of, say, healing plants doesn't come from dissecting them. It comes from a state of open communication or being empty, where the idea of a separate self just kind of dissolves. In that state, she says, the plant can know the human as itself. There's no need for words.
Wait, that's a huge claim. That's a completely different way of knowing. The sources share that amazing personal story from her vision quest. Is there any external validation for that, or is it purely a subjective experience?
Well, the sources frame it as this profound moment of wisdom that received immediate external proof. She was on a mountain, really anxious about her job, about funding her research. She was trapped. And she describes the oak tree speaking to her. The command was simple: tell our stories.
Yeah.
And about her money worries, it said, you need not worry about those boring details. Every single one of them has already been taken care of.
That is just extraordinary.
It is. And the source confirmed she came down the mountain, skeptical but relieved, and immediately checked her email. And in her inbox was a notification that she'd been awarded a huge 3-year research fellowship. The exact job security and funding the oak tree said was already handled. It's presented as this direct link between the, energetic reality of the plant network and her own physical world. So when you take a step back, the central insight from this deep dive is this: plant communities solve the hardest problem there is: survival in a crowded world, not through dominance, but through cooperation and restraint. The system creates these incredible emergent properties: stability, abundance, resilience, things no single plant could ever achieve on its own.
So the lesson for us is actually pretty simple. Sharing works. It works because long-term success depends on the health of your whole community. When your life spans centuries, being a defector, being ruthlessly competitive it's a bad long-term strategy. The plants show us cooperation is the optimal way. They achieved all of this without a brain, without language as we know it, without any human institutions. So here's a final thought for you to take with you. If the collective non-hierarchical intelligence of this Internet of Plants can achieve this much stability, what does that tell you about the potential for that same intelligence in the systems you deal with every day? In your family, your work, your community? And what small, intentional acts of restorative kindness can you do to help those non-hierarchical, stable networks thrive?
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the sources. We hope it brings you a little bit closer to clarity.